Hey, what's going on, traders? It's Johnny here, Trader X. Thank you guys so much for tuning back into the channel. I hope you guys are all enjoying your Friday, and I do want to thank you guys again for your time. But as usual, I'm going to go ahead and get right into the recap. And so as you guys can tell from the thumbnail, unfortunately today was another big red day for me. I was down about $106 on TQQQ, and in terms of my swing position on Tesla, it lost me an additional about $70, right? So unfortunately I am ending Friday on a pretty red note for me, and it sucks, but at the same time I did make a really big mistake today that I want to, share with you guys because I think it'll provide you guys with a lot of value, and it can hopefully, allow you to learn to avoid this in the future, because I definitely am learning from it today, and I'm going to make sure not to make the same mistake again. So as usual, these are my field orders. You guys can tell exactly the times that I was trading at, right? The quantity I was trading with, the ETF itself, which was only TQQQ today, and then the price points that I was buying in and out on the right here, right? And so as you guys can tell too from the timestamps, unfortunately, I was down $105 within about half hour of trading only. So today was definitely one of my worst days in terms of my performance. But yeah, as I mentioned, I pretty much made a really big mistake, and I want to go ahead and explain to you guys exactly what that was. So looking at the chart, right? I pretty much wanted to approach it the same way I was approaching the Nasdaq the whole week, and the way I was approaching it was that I noticed that, earlier on in the week, the Nasdaq started to find a pretty aggressive support level right at the bottom VWAP. And as you guys can tell, anytime it would approach the bottom VWAP, it would end up bouncing, right, and almost pushing up to top VWAP. And so it was trading sideways, but at the same time, it had a pretty consistent pattern. And as we saw, the day after, it also followed that similar pattern where it would fall to bottom VWAP, then bounce and correct itself all the way back up to top VWAP. Then we saw it happen again here. It fell to bottom VWAP, pushed all the way back up to top VWAP, and then even heading into yesterday, it did the exact same thing, right? So this thing corrected itself down to bottom VWAP and ended up bouncing, right, and pushed all the way back up to top VWAP. So there was definitely lots of consistent patterns going on throughout the week, and so I wanted to approach it the exact same way today. And so as you guys can tell, the Nasdaq, right when it opened, it tried forming a little bounce here. So I originally, when it broke below the middle VWAP, got into SQQQ, but I had to cut losses as this thing ended up bouncing here. And as this thing continued to sell off, right, I was pretty unsure on, where the direction was going to be headed. But at the same time, I knew that the past 5 days it would bounce as it approached the bottom VWAP. So I decided that I was going to, try doing a play right over here. And so I was waiting for this thing to sell off and approach closer to bottom VWAP. And as it did, right around this bounce, you guys will see I bought into TQQQ, and this thing ended up pushing, right? And as it pushed, I told myself I wasn't going to average up until it broke middle VWAP, because I was already red on the day trying to get into, TQQQ here, but as this thing sold off, right? Well, originally I got into SQQQ, cut losses because this thing bounced. Then as this thing, tried bouncing, I got into TQQQ. So I was really switching sides of which ETF I wanted to trade really quickly today, and that led to me losing money pretty quickly. It wasn't a significant amount, but it was still something, given the fact that the Nasdaq was a bit more volatile today. And so as this thing started to sell off, I decided I was going to cool off and just, allow this thing to sell off and approach closer to bottom VWAP so that I can try, doing a play from bottom VWAP to top VWAP like it has been performing the past few days. And so as this thing got closer to the bottom VWAP, I bought into TQQQ. And so given the fact that I already lost money in this choppiness here, I decided I wasn't going to average up until this thing broke above the middle VWAP, because to me, that was, giving me more of a confirmation that it was going to start to, correct itself back up like it has been doing. But as you guys can tell, unfortunately, that didn't end up happening. And so as this thing broke above the middle VWAP, right, let me go ahead and zoom in a little more. You guys will notice it pulled on back a bit and then started to bounce. As soon as it bounced here and broke above again, I decided to average up, right? So I was in fully, and then as you guys can tell, this thing ended up flushing down. I had to cut losses. I was down a decent amount, so $105 within half an hour. And so I was just really disappointed in myself because of the fact that, I averaged up really late. And on top of that, if you guys aren't aware, so this is the big mistake I was talking about. There was pretty much the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, he actually gave a speech at 7 o'clock today, right, regarding inflation. And pretty much this is what ended up happening, right? So as you guys can see from the news, we can go ahead and click on one of them, and it was saying that, Jerome Powell was saying that they were going to keep pressing the fight against inflation, right? So what he pretty much was saying that in order to combat inflation, they were still going to be taking an aggressive approach, and because of that, it led to this, initial sell-off. And so that was the big mistake I made. I should have been aware, especially because I trade the Nasdaq future and the ETFs, that there was going to be an important meeting today, right? I somehow, just didn't. I forgot to check the calendar that lists all the important events, and that literally led to this thing selling off aggressively and me having to cut losses here. So that was a huge mistake on my end. If you guys are trading this future and the ETFs, you guys always want to make sure that you guys are on top of any important report that could come out. And so where do you find these types of reports? Well, there's this pretty neat website, right? It's called Finviz. And if you go to the calendar, it pretty much just breaks down everything for the month in terms of the day, right? How important, the specific meetings are going to be, and it even gives you a little impact level. And as you guys can see, right, at 10 a.m., so which would have been 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, right? The report came out. And so unfortunately, right, it wasn't really good news. So this thing actually ended up selling off, and it caused me to lose and stop out on the day, right? And after this thing sold off, I already hit my daily loss, and so I had to be disciplined and walk away. But there was obviously so much potential, and that's why, I was really bothered with my trading today, because this average up could have been avoided, because I definitely would not have averaged up if I knew there was going to be an important meeting, right, with important news that got released. So that was definitely a big mistake on my end, and it's inexcusable. And at the same time, I learned from it. I'm definitely going to always stay up to date with the calendar, and even keep you guys updated as well. So unfortunately, this thing acted as a negative catalyst. It sold off, and where I averaged up, it ended up actually selling off pretty aggressively before I could cut losses. So that's why I was down a decent amount on the day. And I was just pretty disappointed in myself, like I said, because of the fact that I should have been aware of that. But as this thing sold off, I saw a potential play where it could bounce here, right? Because if you guys zoom out the past 5 days, this thing did sell off pretty aggressively. And then what you guys will notice is that there was a bounce. So right around here, I was really tempted to take another trade on TQQQ, but I had to stay disciplined with myself and walk away, because I was already down a decent amount and I couldn't risk losing any more. And ultimately, this thing ended up reversing all the way up to top VWAP. So if you got into TQQQ from around there, that could have been almost a 4% move. So imagine just getting into this thing and averaging up at break above EMA. You would have made money really fast, right? And you could have sold out at previous resistance levels where it made sense. And then the big move on the day, right? So as you guys can tell, the Nasdaq absolutely tanked today. And it was given, the guidance that came out right after the speech. The guidance obviously wasn't good. It wasn't good news that came out regarding inflation, and the fact that they're going to combat it very aggressively really scared everyone. So, as you guys can tell, the market sentiment, wasn't very good today. So it led to this thing selling off super aggressively. And so there was lots of potential today. Unfortunately, I just was, pretty dumb and stopped out before all of the movement ended up happening on the day. And like I said, it's completely my fault, and I always take full responsibility. But yeah, that's something I definitely want to make you guys aware of. Just always be on top of, these reports that are coming out, and I'm going to do my best to inform you guys of every single one that will come out. But as this thing reversed, you could have had a little play here where you could have gotten into TQQQ, averaged up, sold at more overextended levels, right? And why would this have been a good area to sell out of? Well, if you look at the past 5 days, right? Like I mentioned, the Nasdaq, anytime it approached the top VWAP, it would get rejected and sell off. It did it here, it did it here, it did it here yesterday, right? Anytime it approached it, it did it. And so as this thing approached top VWAP, it did make sense why, this thing could sell off. And so that's ultimately what ended up happening, right? This thing completely changed direction on the day. And the beautiful part about trading these ETFs is you could make money as this thing goes both ways. So you could have made money on this TQQQ move, and then as you sold out, right? Well, now what's a good deal? Now that this thing's closer to top VWAP, now you'd probably, be in your best interest to focus your attention to SQQQ. And so if you sold out of TQQQ up here and then got into SQQQ and then averaged up as this thing sold up or sold off on the day, right? You could have made a decent amount on the day. And so, given the fact that there was lots of negative news and this thing did, change direction pretty fast, it could have pretty much told you, yeah, it could have given you an idea that this thing could have sold off aggressively on the day, given the fact that the news wasn't very good, right? So, as this thing started to sell off, right, as you guys can tell, it was continuously getting rejected by the EMA. And so, personally, if I was still trading at this time, I would have tried getting into TQQQ. And as I would have rode this thing up, and as I saw this thing was pushing up very aggressively, I would have cut my shares right around here, right, approaching top VWAP. And then I would have focused on SQQQ because that's the same thing that's been happening all week, like I showed, right? As this thing would become overextended and approach top VWAP, it would end up selling off. Now, obviously, I didn't know that what was gonna be said in the meeting today. No one did, right? So for all we know, it could have been really good news and it could have shot the stock up. But we, as day traders, need to do our part in selling out when it makes sense, right? And buying in at points when it makes sense. So as this thing peaked out, became overextended, and we've known the past few days it's been getting rejected around top VWAP, it probably would have made sense to lock it in there and maybe focus on SQQQ. And if you did that, right, you could have made money on the way up and on the way down. So even if you cut majority of your shares here, if you saw this thing continue to sell off and finally break pattern, what that could have indicated to you was that this thing could have, continued to sell off on the day. So no longer was it, following this trend of bouncing at bottom VWAP. It ended up breaking below bottom VWAP aggressively, right? So that pattern was no longer relevant. And as this thing continued to sell off, you could have tried riding SQQQ all the way down, right? This thing was aggressively selling off, getting rejected by the EMA, and just the market was in your favor if you were an SQQQ. You could have been absolute killing on it because as you guys can tell, right, this thing was, the Nasdaq future itself was down 4.5%. And SQQQ is a triple leverage ETF, so it's 3 times that amount. So this thing was up over 12% on the day. Just imagine, right? If you got into TQQQ, right, we're able to ride this nice little bounce here that it had, and then you change direction to SQQQ, and then we're able to ride this thing up all day, right? Because the momentum was there, the market sentiment was in your favor with SQQQ, right? With shorting the Nasdaq, and so you could have made a killing today. And unfortunately, that's all. Why I was very disappointed in myself. The fact that I was already stopped out on the day before all of this movement. But I should have done a better part at looking at the calendar and making sure there was, if there was any important event to not average up when that report got released. But that's ultimately the big mistake of the day that ended up costing me a lot of money. And I really do hope it's something that you guys can avoid in the future. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. As I mentioned, this website is a pretty good, tool, FinViz. So I definitely recommend that for you guys. And yeah, I hope you guys were all able to end green on the day and were able to end the week green. Unfortunately, I am red on the week again. So I'm going to do my part in, making sure I really practice next week with my brother trading. I am going to definitely be trading paper money. So as you guys can know, my brother and I, we share a joint account, right? And we each trade off, every other week. So I traded this week, then I'll trade not next week, but the week after. He gets to trade next week. And a big part of the reason why is we both don't each have an account with over 25K, right? Because as you guys know, in order to day trade as much as you want, you need to have a minimum of 25K in your account. So, until we get to that point, we're both going to be sharing the account. But as I mentioned, it's really important to show up every day. So on the weeks that I'm not trading and posting videos for you guys, and my brother is, right, I am still practicing. I'm paper trading and waking up every day, and that's really just pushing me to, practice new things if I want to implement them. It's really a good time for me to, practice without having the risk of losing real money. And so that's, a big benefit of paper trading. If you guys want me to make a video on that and even how to set up a paper trading account, just go ahead and comment below and I am more than happy to do that for you guys. But yeah, that's everything I pretty much wanted to talk about. As I mentioned, I hope you guys all ended green, and I really do appreciate your time today. So I hope you guys all enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you guys on Monday. Well, my brother will be posting the recap, but he will see you guys then. Take care and have a good rest of your day.